Web3 security has no scalable solution. I mean, I've been working on this
Mhm,
problem for three years now.
mhm,
So there is no scalable solution. This means no products, no platforms, nothing that would make sense traditionally as a venture investment. So the problem will not go away by itself. I mean, there are solutions and the space is overall improving, but and maturing. But we've seen like all the VC investments in like the Web3 security kind of area just fail as like a general rule. And there's some fundamental reasons why that happens that, we can go into more color, but I think that can be counterintuitive for a lot of investors
mhm.
and builders in the space because the space is predominantly funded by venture capital.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mind with CoinFund. For those of you tuning in for the first time today, my name is Jake Brukhman, and I'm CoinFund CEO, founder, and managing partner. It's just me hosting today's episode. David Packman is out today, but I'm looking forward to getting into this conversation. It's now late October. We're just weeks away from the US election. There's a lot of things happening and churning in the crypto space, but I'll just mention one anecdote, which is one of our portfolio companies, Prime Intellect, has trained the first 10 billion parameter AI model on a fully decentralized methodology, which they also implemented called Open Diloco. So that's kind of an interesting initial volley in this space, which I think will develop into a bit of a race where people are training larger and larger models. And maybe we can cover a little bit of that today. But as a segue into today's episode, as a technologist, today's topic is one I'm pretty passionate about diving into. And we have an exciting conversation on Web3 cybersecurity with the founder of a firm that focuses on securing emerging Web3 technologies. Please welcome Zellic's co-founder and CEO, Luna Tong. Hi, Luna. Welcome to the show.
Hey, hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for jumping on. Okay, well, maybe we can just start by saying a little bit about yourself and how you came to co-found Zellic and what does Zellic do, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, certainly. So, some background on myself. I've been doing security for the better part of, I think, 13 years now. I started when I was around 10 or 11 years old. I got into programming and computer science by hacking Minecraft. So, back then it was really fun because you could just, make some mods for the game. And then if you can do that, then you can fly, then you can break blocks instantly. And you can write like a botnet with a bunch of hijacked accounts to do all your dirty work. But back then, the tech wasn't as advanced as it is now. So we have a bunch of Zoomers now who have taken the Minecraft hacking like much farther. And then around when I was 13 or 14, I taught myself C++ and x86 assembly. So I could hack Counter Strike. I got into CTF when I was 17. That's when I met my co-founder, Jazzy. He's great. I love my co-founder. Yeah, and then we founded the number one CTF team in the world called Perfect Blue. I think that is now called Blue Water. And we've been the number one CTF team in the world for 2020, 2021, and 2023. So sometime around 2021, we decided that we wanted to make a consulting firm, and that's how Zellic came to be. We got the tap on the shoulder by Sam Sun, who is my friend, and he was basically like, "Well, hey, look, guys, like these audit stuff, we need more good auditors. We don't have enough of them here. Everyone uses rubber stamping." So it's like, okay. So we looked into this and then we read a few audit reports. We're like, wow, these are like really terrible. So then we were like, okay, we're going to start doing audits. And yeah, we pretty much got booked out, the two of us, really quick. And then we roped in a friend, we roped in two friends, and now we're 50 full-time employees.
Amazing, amazing. And so 50 full-time employees, where are you guys based?
It's fully remote.
Fully remote. You're in New York City, right?
That's correct.
Okay, awesome. And, tell us a little bit like, okay, when you're running this firm for Web3 auditing, who are your customers and what are you guys focused on, day to day as a business?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're focused on just doing the best audits that are possible. We're focused on doing the best audits consistently and being available. So, our customers are usually Web3 startups and more established Web3 firms. We work with like several L1 foundations. We work with, Layer Zero. We work with Aptos Labs. We work with Mistin Labs. I mean, we've had Solana Foundation on retainer for several years now.
But what are you typically working on? Are you mostly focusing on smart contract code auditing, Or are you
Mm.
actually auditing maybe the C++ or Rust code of the decentralized networks or blockchains themselves?
Yeah, so we're a full service firm. So we cover everything from smart contracts to L1. We do ZK surrogates. I mean, we found numerous critical bugs in various Cosmos chains. So yeah, we do Rust, we do Golang, Solidity, we do Move. Yeah, pretty much everything that has to do with the blockchain and involves like security, we pretty much do it. I mean, we even do all of Polymarket's application security.
Okay, amazing. Right. So just you cover like a wide breadth of, security problems and sort of contexts.
Yeah, we find that we are expert generalists, meaning that
Mhm.
we are experts at everything.
If someone were to come to you with a system that, is brand new, like I always think about Urbit and how that's a system like built from the ground up with very different
Yeah, we'd be
ideas.
able to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. What is the
I'm pretty familiar with some of the Urbit adjacent people. They're great.
Yeah, totally. I guess like my question is more like, what's the skill set that someone needs to be able to just jump into a whole big system like that?
I think that the core skill set that you're looking for here, which is also the skill set that we hire for. I feel like this is another thing that a lot of security firms in Web3 still get wrong. We hire fundamentally for security talent, not like Web3
Mm.
background. We get a lot of these, you get a lot of these like spam recruiters, right? They're like, hey, we have this candidate. Would you like recruitment services? So these are pretty much always a scam, in my opinion. I think that like founders, like one of their number one jobs is like hiring, right? So if you're outsourcing this to like a recruiter, this is kind of Pepega in my opinion. But one thing that like a lot of people in Web3 do is they're always like, oh yeah, we're looking for someone who like has written a bunch of protocols or before. Or if they're hiring auditors, they're like, we're gonna look for people who have done a bunch of smart contract like security boot camps or audits or whatever. And in general, like the talent quality in Web3 is really bad. I think it's like less bad, maybe slightly less bad than it was like 1 or 2 years ago, but it's still pretty trash. So we hire people like just based on their raw ability to hack software in general,
Mhm.
which I think is very different from being a Solidity developer. And the reason for that is you take someone who's been hacking iPhones in Chrome for 3 or 4 years, someone who's been to DEF CON CTF as a finalist for 5 years. These are people you're just going to give them any new target and they're just going to pick it up and they're going to find the flaws in it. I mean, these are the people that when they go to the airport, they're just bugged, they're just annoyed by all the small things because, I could walk past that airport security. I could totally get onto this plane.
So, okay, so you're saying you try to source talent from kind of traditional cybersecurity contexts. But does that mean they can just jump into a Solidity code base and know what's going on, or is there an on-ramping period for people like that?
Yeah, there's an on-ramping period. And to be clear, we don't hire just like any random security engineer. I think security research is very different from security engineering. We mainly focus on security research, meaning the stuff where we're digging in to find the bugs. Security engineering is mainly like doing things well securely. And security research is, I want to break this thing.
Mhm.
Yeah. And yeah, there is an on-ramping period. So we've seen that if you take someone who's like an expert at like Chrome or whatever, it takes them like no more than 2 months to get pretty much as good as the best security researchers in Web3 or Web3 native. Beyond after 2 months, they start exceeding those
And
people.
how do you test? Like, what makes a security researcher that you wanna hire? What tests do you give them to determine that?
Yeah, we have a hiring assessment. We give them a protocol that we wrote and it has bugs. And then
Mhm,
we see which of the bugs they find, how many of the bugs they find. It's a practical assessment.
mhm.
And obviously we have a pretty strict interviewing process too, because we're the highest paying auditing firm as far as I can tell.
Gotcha. Wow, okay. And so like a very hands-on process, and you mentioned it sounds like you hire, like, all over the world?
Yeah, I mean, we don't really care where these people live as long as they're not OFAC. I mean, if they're like really good hackers, we want them on our roster. And yeah, we are really like strict with our hiring. We hire people that we personally have vetted or we know that like several people inside the company have vetted for vouch for them.
Mhm. Yeah, very good. Okay, and maybe now moving on to a little bit of the subject matter of what you guys audit. I think there was a time, I'm thinking back to the ICO boom of 2017, where probably like the vast majority of audits were happening on Solidity smart contracts for ICO projects, people trying to raise money, in this decentralized way. But more recently, there has been a renaissance of alternative VMs, ZK VMs, kind of Rust based smart contract programming languages, also like the Move VM. So what are you guys seeing these days? Give us a little bit of a breakdown of what companies are coming to you with for audits in 2024.
I mean, Starcore is a huge client of ours. I mean, there's also like Ton. We do a lot of alt ones, alt VMs.
Hmm.
I mean, they're kind of like one of our bread and butter lines. And we find that we're able to service these customers much better than existing firms. Because a lot of existing firms in Web3, they see something that's not Solidity and they like struggle.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're applying these teams of highly specialized sort of humans all over the world. How do you measure if you're doing well? Has is there like a metric?
I mean, how many bugs do we find? How many bugs do we miss?
Mhm.
How many security incidents do our customers have? These are fairly objective metrics, and we think that we do the best in the industry.
Great. And do you have numbers on that? Can you share like how well have you guys done on those metrics?
Just go to our website, Zellic.io or reports.zellic.io,
Hmm.
and just click on any of the reports. It's probably going to have highs or crits. I know easily over a third of our reports find highs or crits. I think it used to be a half, but then we just started doing more audits.
Hmm. Very good. Okay,
And
so
then as you do more audits, you just end up auditing code that is secure because you get a bunch of repeat clients. And then as you work with them, they get better at writing less shitty code.
yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. So that's great that you guys are measuring that and keeping track of that. And I guess my next question is, and we talked a little bit about this in Singapore when we were there for Token 2049, but more recently there's been more AI approaches in cybersecurity, right? And AI is starting to get a little bit better at finding bugs, maybe like humans. Where would you say the state of the art of that is today, and what does that look like in the future? Is AI going to be finding more bugs than specialized security researchers?
No, I don't think AI is gonna, like, really replace security researchers, though I think it's gonna have interesting effects on, let's say, the auditing market, especially towards the down market. I think, like, the easy to remember narrative here is just O1 is the new Slither. Do you know what Slither is?
I don't actually. What? Why don't you explain it?
So Slither is this really popular static analyzer. It basically finds all these random dings in your code base. Oh, you have mint in an unbounded for loop. That's bad. Or, ooh, you're missing documentation on this function, this or that kind of thing. It finds pretty surface level issues. So O1, I think, is just like pretty much just better than Slither now. O1, we like tried it pretty extensively internally, and it's surprisingly good, but it's still rife with hallucinations. So whereas with like previous LLMs, it's like you have you seen that meme where it's like the guy stepping on the rake and then the guy doing the 360 to step on the rake?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like that with the hallucinations. Yeah. Also, it's my personal pet theory that O1 is basically just a bunch of four O's in a trench coat with some glue stacked on top. It's kind of like cognition, I think. So O1, it finds like some simple issues. It's pretty good at finding like simple issues that you can just look and be like, yeah, that's a problem. So we think that O1 will end up commoditizing the down market for the auditing firms. So we think that on the low end, it'll mainly just be firms hiring junior engineers and telling them to run O1 or some proprietary wrapper. But it's basically just value added O1 and then churning out a bunch of reports. So since the cost and barrier to entry is pretty low, this will lead to like a commodity market with low margins and pricing power, right? So it will all just be value added O1. And there'll be like pretty big quality control issues, but I mean, you get what you pay for. On the middle and up markets, we'll probably still see AI getting adopted, but like only like as an initial pass because I mean, it's like there and cheap. Like, why don't you use it, right? That's more assurance for free. But O1 isn't nearly smart enough to find the bugs that require like thinking in context or like any kind of creative thinking or thinking out the box. So we're not like too concerned about that. Like if you look at the landscape of vulnerabilities, like how that evolves in any target, look at iOS, right? Look at iOS phone research. That's like a very mature landscape. And you basically can't participate in that arena unless you're like an elite hacker now.
So can O1 find bugs that have never been seen before, or is it more it's kind of familiar with a repository of bugs based on its training?
I mean, sometimes it can get lucky and like stumble into it, but it's not going to do the kind of creative thinking that a security researcher is going to do.
Hmm.
It's going to be like, ooh, this is a smart contract. I better check for reentrancy. It's still going to do that. It's still the problem is like it still thinks like a checklist security researcher, which is not what you want in an audit.
Hmm. Right. And so is your outlook though that could, because I think a lot of people in AI, and I know you have some background in AI as well, like they have this idea that there are these like scaling theories, for intelligence. If we add more compute, more data, we're going to get kind of smarter, higher IQ LLMs, and maybe we'll get smarter reasoners like O1. So do you anticipate, that model's ability to find bugs to significantly increase over time as the intelligence increases?
I don't know.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to say that I don't know. I mean, if I had to speculate, I think one limitation will be finding high quality training data for training it to think, because it's basically like thinking auto-regressively. It's like making reasoning tokens or like whatever. It's basically like thinking out loud, right? I think you might need to have like training data that is examples of how you want it to think, and that could be hard to generate. But that's pure speculation.
Hmm. Are there other
I don't
like
really know.
are there other AI approaches? I feel like I've heard some security projects talk about like reinforcement learning, for example, where you're using AI to, I guess, sort of like more intelligently search for vulnerabilities. And
Like an agentic approach with RL?
yeah, are you more bullish on that kind of approach?
Are you thinking of a particular company or project?
Um, I've seen a few projects where, just those terms have been dropped. Like we're using reinforcement learning to just create
Mhm.
better like fuzzy and stuff.
Yeah, RL is like really hard.
Yeah.
So I feel like unless it's like a team with a hardcore AI background with a bunch of AI PhDs or ML PhDs, they're probably NGMI. If they're building in Web3, it's 100% NGMI. Anyone who says they're training a Solidity security model is like NGMI. I don't even think about them.
Hmm. Okay. I mean, I
And training models is just like really hard. And then RL is like stupidly fucking hard.
I agree with you. I've said, publicly many times, including a token on various panels, that, when we think about decentralized AI investing, we really like focusing on people with true AI experience that can bring in Web3 primitives, but then create products that are going to Web2. And that's such a important criteria for us. There's a lot of people building, kind of Web3 AI stuff that nobody in Web2 actually wants to use today. A lot of inference startups out there. So maybe let me bring it back a little bit. Like one thing that we always ask on this show, which is kind of the theme of the show, Luna, is what's the one thing, in crypto, or in your case, maybe like Web3 cybersecurity, that nobody is really talking about? What's a unique view you have here, but that people should be paying a lot closer attention to?
Yeah, most Web3. Yeah, I don't know why I keep saying this, but basically all Web3 security platforms or like products are not investable opportunities.
Mhm. Can you
Yeah.
expand on that? Like, why do you believe that?
Well, I mean, it's just that like Web3 security has no scalable solution. I mean, I've been working on this
Mhm,
problem for three years now.
mhm,
So there is no scalable solution. This means no products, no platforms, nothing that would make sense traditionally as a venture investment. So the problem will not go away by itself. I mean, there are solutions and the space is overall improving, but and maturing. But we've seen like all the VC investments in like the Web3 security kind of area just fail as like a general rule. And there's some fundamental reasons why that happens that, we can go into more color. But I think that can be counterintuitive for a lot of investors
mhm.
and builders in the space because the space is predominantly funded by venture capital.
It sounds like your view is based on a view of a lack of automation. Like you're saying, AI.
It's like not an automatable
Right.
problem.
You're saying like AI is like kind of smart, but it's not smart enough to do the entire job, especially on the high end.
Yep.
And it's not even smart enough to do like a good job right now. We need more advancements there. And then,
A lot more advancements.
right,
Yeah.
reinforcement learning or alternative approaches are kind of hard and require like really specialized teams. So it suggests it's a very like nascent space. Then we've had other approaches, like maybe there's a few companies out there doing formal verification. Any thoughts on that side?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've seen a lot of teams like do static analysis and formal verification, and that's what their website said 2 years ago. If you go to their website now, it says they're an auditing firm.
Okay, right.
Like, do you want me to name names? I can list examples of product companies that have turned into consulting companies because they realized that the space is fucked and they gave up.
Well, maybe we should talk about like why that process is happening. So it sounds like they try to automate it, but it sounds like in doing something like a formal verification, you need to create like a big spec, and that ends up being human endeavor?
No, it's not even technical. It's not even technical reason.
Okay, what's your view?
It's like a fundamental economic or market reason.
Okay.
It's just the TAM. Like, how many teams are there in the space? There's 100 teams. And even the teams that have money, go to DeFi Llama, like all the TVLs, like in the top 50 teams, like 80% of the TVLs in the top 50
Mhm.
teams. If you include the top 100 teams, it's like basically all the TVL in this space. And even the teams that have money are not going to pay for your product, right? So like a lot of people say, oh, what is PMF is $1 million of ARR per year, right? Or I guess $1 million of ARR. So if you have 100 customers, each customer has to be paying you $10,000 a year. But like these teams don't want to pay 10K for your SaaS product for your security SaaS. They're just going to go get an audit because audits are basically in the same price ballpark as that. And they also with the audit, they get like a PDF that says they've been audited, which is like really important for them to go to market.
So basically, you're kind of saying the problem is really the fact that this is a nascent market. It's a SaaS model. We're not finding the right constituents to make these SaaS models sustainable. Like you generally would want,
Yes.
a couple of like really big enterprises to drive, your main revenue in a SaaS business. We're not seeing that in Web3 because there's not that many huge enterprises in Web3. And then we have this longer tail, but that longer.
I mean, we have huge enterprises in Web3. We have Coinbase,
Mhm.
we have all these other things, but I mean, none of these people write smart contracts.
Right, right. Well, but then they're not customers then, right? If Coinbase,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, okay. So I'm saying like in the addressable customer base, there's not a ton of Coinbase like companies. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you have this long tail, but you're saying, well, that long tail who actually has money is still it's a very short long tail. It's like maybe it has 100 companies in it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So it sounds like the problem is really there's not enough demand for like as much demand as there is, and as much as people want to like do ICOs and smart contracts and God knows what, right? There's still not enough demand in demand side kind of capital or budget, right, to make a venture scale cybersecurity business. So given the obvious fact that you run a cybersecurity firm, right? So is your view then that hey, this is not going to be a venture scale business anytime soon and it's really about scaling the human aspects of this in order to be successful, or like how do you think of yourself as a cybersecurity CEO in that context?
Well, I mean, the thing is that I don't want to beef, but I feel like a lot of companies that turn into consulting firms that used to be product firms, like usually
Mhm.
these auditing firms start like going downhill after 1 or 2 years because the team gets burned out. It's true that audits are a lifestyle business, but it also happens to be like a lifestyle that most founders don't want. Like we find that most teams want to like, chase the dream and the status of being like a product founder, like you make a piece of software and it just, sells itself and makes money. They don't want to be consultants, right? So delivering good audits consistently and competitively with the market with good customer support is like a huge grind and most teams aren't a good fit. Like most teams don't want to do the insane amount of grunt work and self-deprecating work that is basically like enterprise consulting sales.
Mhm.
It's just like kind of hard and a lot of teams just get burned out after 2 years and I'm just built different cuz I don't care.
All right. Well, maybe that's a good segue into sort of thinking more about the future of Web3 cybersecurity. And then maybe if we have a couple of minutes left toward the end, maybe we can cover some of the AI stuff that's been going on as well, because I know you have an interest in that. But thinking ahead, so, you mentioned that kind of size of the market is a really important economic indicator of the success of this type of firm. How do you see that market changing in the future? Maybe I'm pretty bullish on crypto markets right now. It feels like we're going into a bull market regime. It feels like there's a lot of institutional acceptance, like a lot more enterprises are going to be using blockchains. I know some banks have a consensus view internally that banks will be on public blockchains in a few years. So as that market grows, does this situation that you've described with not enough kind of SaaS returns, does that change? What's your outlook for Web3 cybersecurity?
No, I don't think it's really going to change because another problem with a technical solution here is that it's not comprehensive.
Mhm.
Like people want their audits to be comprehensive. Okay, it's not really fair to auditing firms to call it an audit because it's not supposed to be comprehensive, but people hope and believe that their audit is comprehensive. Like they get mad at you if you miss bugs, right? So everyone goes in the expectation, okay, we're going to try to find all the bugs as best as we can. We're going to try our best to be as comprehensive as possible, right? And the reason why they have such a high standard for their security services or products is because, let's talk about the design constraints of the space, right? Let's talk about like what gets PMF in this space, right? It's payments, gambling, and funny business, right? So what's the common thread here? It's like Reg ARB, right? So fundamentally, you need it to be decentralized and permissionless. And at a deep level, that's kind of like the entire point of Web3. So, but that means that you have like no undo buttons and you have no firewalls, and anyone can hack a smart contract. So you end up with a very hostile setting. So this is like the dark forest that people talk about. And the stuff you build ends up being very fragile. So then you see like security continue to be like a top priority for projects, but that also means that like you have to get your security like absolutely right. So then people are like, okay, why am I going to buy your SaaS if it like, okay, maybe you find some bugs, but I need you to find like all of the bugs, and I'm not going to get that unless I get like a human to look at it.
Hmm. Yeah. So you sort of very adamant that over time, even as the space grows, people are just going to have to scale human talent in this area for a long time,
Yeah.
at least, right? To get this right.
Yep.
Maybe can we put on the hat of someone who's maybe like launching, call it a L1 blockchain or maybe an L2
Mhm.
blockchain? This is a project that probably has a bunch of people working on it all over the world. It probably has a code base in some kind of compiled, robust language, maybe Rust, maybe Go, maybe
Mhm.
C++ in
Mhm.
certain cases.
Mhm.
Um, and then it has probably a new smart contract programming language. We've seen a bunch of that,
Mhm.
or a new VM. What kind of sort of cybersecurity services should they be seeking to make sure this project gets off the ground and is, as safe as it could be for mainnet?
Yeah, they need to get the L1 audited, and they need to get whatever like ecosystem projects that are launching in the VM
Mhm.
audited as well.
And what does that process look like? Like, when do they engage, Zellic or another
Mhm.
cybersecurity firm? Like, at which stage, and how long does it take?
Yeah, ideally as early as possible,
Mhm,
but realistically, they're going to be booking these audits timed to coincide with their mainnet launch. Most auditing firms are booked out a few weeks right now, so I mean, it's better to reach out to them at least 2 to 3 months in advance.
mhm,
I also think that competitive audits, I'm here to shill code Freenet because we just acquired them. Competitive audits are another great addition to consultative audits because they can add another layer of defense beyond just like the time box nature of consultative audits, which are a well-known limitation of them.
mhm. And how long does it normally take to audit, like, an L1?
Like a whole L1,
Mhm.
and it's like completely from scratch.
Completely from scratch with its own VM, with its own language?
I don't know, like a month,
A month? Okay, pretty good. How many people would be working on such an audit, would you say?
2 or 3.
Mhm. Very cool, very cool.
I mean, it depends on how much scope they want. I mean, most of the time, like they don't really want you to audit every single line of code they've written. That'd be like insane. They're just gonna be like, okay, go in here and tell us if you can find these problems, like chain halting bugs, like denial of service, or can you like break the consensus in this or that way, that kind of thing.
Mhm, mhm. So, like, kind of specific categories of, known problems that could
Yeah,
arise.
and that pares it down to be a lot more manageable because instead of
Mhm,
just finding every single bug in the code base, which a lot of times you don't really care about because every code base is just going to have a bunch of bugs. You only really care about the bugs that make you lose money.
mhm, mhm. And so typically, does a firm pay kind of a one-time fee per audit, or do you guys work on retainer, or how does that work?
Yeah, yeah, we do both one-offs and we also do retainers. We do this thing for foundations where like they can just pay us in a really big validator delegation too. And then we give them like audits in return.
And, an audit is done on some checkpoint of the code, right? And then when is the next appropriate time to do an audit again? Is it when you like, how much changes to the code have to occur for the next audit to be kind of in play?
Yeah, we have clients who have us on retainer that we audit with them on an ongoing basis. So for
Mhm,
example, layer 0, every time they like push anything, they just throw it over the fence.
mhm,
So we're auditing basically every single pull request for layer 0. There's other teams that like to work on a more waterfall basis and they just schedule their audits to coincide with like major releases and deployments and
mhm.
stuff like that.
And the output of an audit is typically a document, right? Which shows vulnerabilities that are identified?
Well, far from that, it's also the advice between
Mm,
like the auditors and the engineers, which often proves to be invaluable in the long term.
And
Yeah.
if you do find a critical vulnerability, I'm assuming the team is expected to fix that before going to mainnet,
Oh, I hope so.
right?
I hope
But do
so.
they run it by you again? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like remediations are standard in the industry. We obviously review fixes for free, or at least I think that firms should review fixes for free.
Mhm,
I don't know if everyone does that.
mhm. Knowing that cybersecurity is like very, very difficult, right? And people are never going to be able to find all bugs in every code base. What guarantees do you give customers? If you miss something, like how does that work?
Yeah, we can't really give guarantees because it's a human process, but I don't think anyone really can.
I've heard some of these like AI based cybersecurity proposals where they're saying, sometimes we're actually able to identify bugs in the VM as well, like just going beyond the code, right? And one of the reasons is because the AI can sort of find these bugs better. Do you guys include um, like the VM in your auditing process, or how does that work?
I mean, the first thing that you described sounds like pretty sketchy marketing because
Mm.
if you point the AI at the VM, then it will look for bugs in the VM. In the same way, if you tell us to audit the VM, then we will look for bugs in the VM,
Well, I
right?
mean, they're kind of making the case that sometimes there's a bug that only appears as a combination of a vulnerability in the code and a vulnerability in the VM. And unless you're looking for that specifically, it might be like,
If I'm being honest, I think the AI probably has to have the VM's code as input.
mm,
I find it unlikely that it would randomly just like search for bugs that exist because of the VM. Granted, we find these bugs all the time.
like just in the course of normal, auditing.
Yeah, I mean, and also like sometimes an auditor gets curious and you're like, this opcode's really complicated. How does this shit even work? And then they're like, where's this thing like freaking implemented? And they go dig for it and they're like, huh, this doesn't look right.
Mhm.
Oh, this like opcode in the L1 is broken. Or like, oh, this is like broken. This happens all the time. Like we keep like bumping into like bugs in production because we're like, how does that work? And then they like keep double clicking on stuff and then they realize this is like a live on-chain bug. We have to disclose this now.
Great. I have one more Web3
Yeah.
cybersecurity question for you, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about decentralized AI. So, what the question that I had was, what's sort of people's biggest misconception about Web3 cybersecurity? And I think you partially answered that just naturally in the course of our conversation. You basically said, look, I don't think this is a highly automatable, scalable business. And that's definitely like a contrarian view to a lot of products that are being pushed in the market. There's a lot of products, in cybersecurity that are touting kind of
I
automation.
mean, yeah, like we have unicorns in cybersecurity and Web 2 because a lot of cybersecurity products are just compliance tech.
Mhm,
But there are no compliance requirements in Web 3 because the space is very heavily centered around Reg Arb.
mhm.
And if there's no need to like pay for your SaaS product to be SOC 2 compliant or whatever, I'm not going to pay for it.
Right, right. So, are there any other misconceptions you think people have about Web3 cybersecurity? Or maybe phrased another way, if someone is starting a Web3 cybersecurity firm today, what do you think they should know?
Like Web3 cybersecurity is a completely different ballgame than Web2 cybersecurity. You are not going to be talking to CISOs here.
Mhm.
Most of the orgs you talk to do not even have a CISO. They will never have a CISO. There are like five dudes. There are five dudes just slinging Solidity or whatever, or Golang. And also, there are no compliance requirements. People do not seek out security because they need to check a box. They seek out a security because they want to avoid a business ending event. In Web 2, you get ransomware and it's okay, that's really unfortunate. It's a great thing we have cyber insurance. And then in Web 3 is you get your smart contract hacked and then your like protocol is just like over or like it will never be as successful as it could have been. A really hard thing about building in Web3 security is you have to get it 100% right.
Mhm.
There is no margin for error. There is no tolerance for anything that slips through the cracks. You just have to get it 100% right all of the time, always. So if you're whatever you're building, that is what your customer wants. So they don't want something that is like, oh, we find like half of the bugs. So like your engineers can just worry about only the other half. They're like, I want you to come in here, wave the security wand, and make all of the bugs go away. So unless your solution can effectively tell the customer, we go find all of the bugs. then they don't want to pay for that because they'll just like then I'm just gonna call Luna and tell Zellic to audit the thing.
That's very insightful. Okay, and maybe in the last couple of minutes, we can talk a little bit about decentralized AI. It's a little bit of an adjacent space here, and I know that you, Luna, have taken at least some interest in it. I don't know if you guys have made any investments there out of your venture side, but what's your take on decentralized AI, and what do you think are, if anything, is interesting in that space?
I think decentralized AI is great. MyShell,
Hmm.
I like MyShell.
Can you say what MyShell does for anyone who might not be familiar with it?
Yeah, they're like a decentralized AI girlfriend thing with a token.
Hmm. So chat bots that are kind of companion bots. And what does the token do?
Yeah. No idea, but I mean, like we got it at a really good valuation and it went up.
Okay. So that sounds like a little bit more from the kind of like bringing LLMs to a Web3 context. I know you and I have talked a bunch about maybe more of the tech stack for compute, training, inference. Any thoughts on that side of things?
But yeah, I mean, like there's a number of projects building here. One category I think is real interesting is like consensus networks, I guess, kind of like BitTensor or Laura. I think those are pretty cool because they're kind of like a meta layer that you can build more stuff on top of. For example, you can build like stuff that's we're gonna have all the validators agree on the weights for this problem or something like that. Or we're gonna have
Hmm.
all the miners train stuff for this problem. I think that's pretty cool. Although it's like more of a competitive approach than like a like a collaborative approach for decentralized training. I think decentralized training is really hard because like you have the issue of just like moving all the weights around. That's not great, right? And also a lot of these decentralized training approaches are still kind of focused on DDP, distributed data parallel, which
Hmm.
isn't like a super great way to like scale models. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. We did see, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, we did see Prime Intellect just train a 10 billion parameter model. They did that with OpenDialoco, which is a data parallel approach. And I agree that I think that will go so far. But at 10 billion, that's already I think we do have llama models that are less than that that are meant to run sort of locally on device, right? So if we can train a 10 billion parameter, we're getting somewhere in terms of like locally runnable models. I think we're going to get a little bit farther than 10 billion with data parallel approaches, but I think the really hard problem is when you actually shard the neural network. So that's more like people are doing with swarm, I think it's called swarm intelligence, right? There's been a 1 billion parameter model trained in that way. I think Jensen has been doing a lot of work on, again, sharded models, model parallelism, and Pluralis is working on that as well. So definitely early, a lot of more work to do. I think we need to shift the state of the art some more here. But I do think we're seeing kind of progress that just 12 months ago, people were saying, like, oh, this isn't even going to work at all, And I do think we're seeing some progress there. Maybe one other thing to mention before we wrap is a lot of chatter on crypto Twitter right now about Truth Terminal and basically this, AI personality that suggested a meme coin, and then that meme, which is called Goat, that meme coin is now in production and went up significantly in terms of market cap. And I think there's a bunch of other people jumping on that bandwagon of, should we let AIs launch meme coins? Any thoughts on that? Is that just going to be another speculative bubble like meme coins and ICOs, or are we on to something here?
What do you think?
Well, I think crypto reacts always to sort of new setups, and this is a new setup, but I also can see how this can get like really noisy and unwieldy and become kind of a distraction. I'm all for innovation, but I want us to keep our eye on the ball around in crypto around mainstream adoption. I want to get distracted with a bunch of like speculation stuff.
Hey, Pump Fund has like really good PMF.
Yeah, it's true. I know the CoinFund team, the investment team was doing an offsite last week, and one of the things we mentioned there of notable areas to keep track of is meme coin infra. So there's definitely
Three
market
things that
there.
have PMF right now are payments, gambling, funny business.
Okay. All right. Sounds like Luna's bullish.
I mean, I'm bullish meme coins because people want this stuff. If people
Yeah.
want it, let them have it. You know? I mean, I'm down to coin flip whenever. Gambling's great. I mean, granted, I will gamble responsibly, but I mean, Jazzy's more of a degen than me. It's really funny. But yeah, if you want to do meme coins, let them do meme coins. Why not?
S-
Don't hate on them.
someone should let Elizabeth Warren know. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciated having you on the show. That
Mhm.
was Zellic co-founder, CEO Luna Tong. For those of you who tuned in, thank you so much for listening. Let's keep the conversation going. Leave us a review. Let us know what you thought about the show. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's at jbrook, JBRUKH. And Luna, what's your Twitter handle?
It's GF_256. If you look up CTS, it's the one with the pink anime profile.
Amazing. Thank you. And then make sure you download the Mind Podcast where you get your podcasts. And we'll be back soon to dig deep on ideas of the blockchain space. Thank you.
Meow. Bye.